somebody lives right next to you could be building a bomb while you're just minding your business.
He had burns and wounds to his body. He intentionally detonated that device. We are New Yorkers. We don't live in fear.
It is Tuesday, December 12th. A Fox News alert: New York City on edge as President Trump condemns the attempted ISIS attack. What we just learned about how the Port Authority bomber got into the U.S. as police ransack his Brooklyn home. We are there live.
I want to make America great again with President Trump.
All right, it's a fight to the finish in Alabama. Voters headed to the polls as both candidates there for that Senate race pulling out the political heavyweights, the high-stakes election that is just hours away.
And they want all the days off and to be chief in 6 months. Why Dallas police are blaming millennials for their staffing shortage. Fox and Friends First continues right now. Sing it, Rob. Go ahead. Good morning.
I choose not to.
Oh, you could just do a little singing.
You caught me mumbling.
Good morning to you. That was a live look outside. A quiet look on this Tuesday morning in Midtown Manhattan. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jillian Mealy.
And I'm Rob Schmidt. Thanks for waking up early. Straight to a Fox News alert this morning and brand new information about the Port Authority bomber who targeted the largest transit hub in New York City.
The Bangladeshi native used chain migration to come to the U.S. 7 years ago. He learned how to build the botched pipe bomb online and planned to do it all in the name of ISIS.
Yeah, police now swarming his home in Brooklyn, New York, searching for new clues, and that's where we find Todd Pyro live this morning, right outside of Manhattan. Todd, what do we know about the motive at this point?
Yeah, that's the question, Rob and Jillian. Good morning to you. It is very quiet here now, but like you said, investigators spent yesterday here in this Brooklyn neighborhood poring over every single detail of the suspected terrorist's life. His name, Akayed Ullah. He lives here in this Brooklyn neighborhood after he entered the U.S. in 2011 from Bangladesh on a chain migration visa. That's a preferential visa available for those with family here in the U.S. Ullah was a licensed cab driver from March 2012 to March 2015, but his taxi and limo license was not renewed after 2015. Law enforcement said Ullah was inspired by ISIS, but did not appear to have direct contact with the group and likely acted alone. Reports say the 27-year-old was upset with the way Muslims have been treated by the U.S. and by recent Israeli actions in Gaza, and he reportedly became radicalized by Islamic State media. Yesterday, a lawyer for the family spoke out about the attempted terror attack, but ended up condemning law enforcement. Take a listen.
We are heartbroken by the violence that was targeted at our city today and by the allegations being made against a member of our family. But we are also outraged by the behavior of the law enforcement officials who have held children as small as 4 years old out in the cold, and who pulled a teenager out of high school classes to interrogate him without a lawyer, without his parents.
It's not immediately clear if the 4-year-old or teenager mentioned there in that soundbite are related to the suspect. Ullah allegedly packed a 5-inch metal pipe bomb and battery pack into the right side of his jacket before setting it off at the nation's busiest bus terminal in the heart of yesterday's morning rush. He told police he made the bomb at his work, reportedly an electric company. 3 people injured in the attack have been released from the hospital, and Ullah reportedly told investigators that he chose that specific subway station near Times Square because of Christmas posters hanging near that area. Rob, Jillian, back to you.
It's disturbing.
Yeah, that's nice. All right, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks so much.
Brand new calls this morning to abolish the controversial visa program that gave the accused bomber a one-way ticket to America.
Caroline Shively is live in Washington this morning with the swift and strong response from the president on this. Caroline.
Good morning to you, Rob and Jillian. The suspect came to this country in 2011 under the Extended Family Chain Migration Program. In a typical year, 2/3 of immigrants get a green card because of family connections. Now the president wants action. In a statement, he said, quote, "America must fix its lax immigration system, which allows far too many dangerous, inadequately vetted people to access our country."
We know that the president's policy calls for an end to chain migration, which is what this individual came to the United States through. And if his policy had been in place, then that attacker would not have been allowed to come in the country.
The suspect, Akayed Ullah, is from Bangladesh, but he's lived in the U.S. since 2011 legally. He was reportedly inspired by ISIS, and he's talking to authorities. Senator Lindsey Graham says investigators need to focus on gathering intelligence from Ullah, finding out what makes a terrorist tick. And to do that, he says, you can't treat the suspect like an ordinary criminal.
He was trying to commit an act of terrorism. He should be held as a suspected enemy combatant and interrogated under the law of war. He's apparently a allegiance soldier of the caliphate.
The White House is supporting the RAISE Act, which would limit the amount of extended family that could be sponsored for visas. That could cut legal immigration in this country by half. President Trump also wants to hire more ICE agents and give immigration officers more power. Jillian and Rob, back to you.
All right, Caroline, thank you so much. The other big story today, all eyes on the Alabama Senate election as voters begin heading to the polls just a few hours from now. Roy Moore and Doug Jones facing off in what is an unlikely nail-biter in a very red state. It's a race that has captured the nation's attention, and Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, D.C. with the fight to the finish here. Hey, Griff.
Hey, good morning, Rob. It's in the hands of Alabama voters now, and those hands haven't elected a Democrat to the Senate in over 25 years. But despite the deep red state, embattled Republican Roy Moore finds himself in a near dead-even dogfight with Democrat Doug Jones. Even trails him in the latest Fox News poll as President Trump tried to rally the base with a robocall yesterday, and White House strategist Steve Bannon flew in for a last-minute rally. Moore, who has categorically denied the allegations against him, but was absent from the campaign trail over the weekend, took to the mics last night with a message for his detractors.
We talk about draining the swamp. It's difficult to drain the swamp when you're up to your neck in alligators. I want to make America great again with President Trump.
Meanwhile, Doug Jones got some heavyweight outside help. Former President Obama and Vice President Biden both recording robocalls. And former NBA star Charles Barkley flew in for a rally as Jones continued to frame this election as a referendum on Moore's behavior and something larger than just one candidate.
I think it's time that we say no more to putting people down, that we say no more to treating people as second-class citizens. We say no more to discriminating against those that are the least fortunate among us. It's just time, folks, that we say no more.
So polls open in just a few hours at 7 a.m. local, and this certainly has national implications, Rob, because Democrats are winless, 0-5 for special elections this year, but this one is certainly very unique. Who knows, they might even be talking about something other than football for a little while today.
Going to be an interesting day, Griff. Thank you. An apocalyptic mushroom cloud of smoke hovering over Southern California. Just take a look at this picture. This is happening as the raging wildfires engulf the state for a second week. Thousands of firefighters shoulder to shoulder working to tame and break 6 infernos that are still burning strong. The Thomas Fire, the 5th largest in the state's history, is growing by the hour, and it's now bigger than New York City and Boston combined. On top of the high winds fueling the flames, there's no rain in the forecast this week. New overnight, the Department of Justice requesting an emergency stay to halt the acceptance of transgender recruits into the military. President Trump tweeting in July that it would place additional burdens on the armed forces. Last month, a federal judge ruled against the change.
The Department of Justice is currently reviewing the legal options to ensure that the president's directive can be implemented.
The Pentagon says as of now, transgender enlistment will go on starting January 1st.
All right, allegations of sexual misconduct leading to suspensions at the NFL Network. Bloomberg News reporting that Hall of Famer Marshall Faulk, Heath Evans, and Ike Taylor, all analysts there, are named in a lawsuit by a former female employee of the league-owned network. The accusations range from groping to inappropriate text messages. Another ex-player and former network employee, Donovan McNabb, also named along with a former executive.
3 Miami Dolphins players kneeling during the national anthem on Monday Night Football. The Dolphins pulling off a surprise victory over the division-leading New England Patriots 27-20.
Wow, this ratings did show more fatigue for Sunday Night Football despite a very good Ravens and Steelers matchup. The game down 11% from the week prior.
I think a Giants fan here in New York gave me this read. The Philadelphia Eagles learning their star QB is done for the season. Breaking our hearts. The team confirming Carson Wentz has a torn left ACL.
Really?
Yep.
The Eagles also reportedly showing no interest in signing former quarterback Colin Kaepernick to fill that spot.
Well, because we've got Nick Foles.
Okay, so you got a backup guy. This is her team.
Just no backup to the backup.
That's right.
Anyway, a Fox News alert. Subway terror attack. New York City targeted by a terrorist for the second time in just 6 weeks. So where does the investigation go from here? A retired bomb squad commander with the crucial steps that need to be taken. That's live next.
And a really disgusting sign of disrespect. The vigil for Kate Steinle, that young woman killed in San Francisco, is torn down and trashed on a college campus in that city.
And the secret message Dennis Rodman says he has from Kim Jong-un.
We are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me.
Welcome back to Fox News Alert. More on our top story. A wannabe suicide bomber's rush hour blast in a New York City subway, failing to cause the bloodshed he intended in the name of ISIS.
Thankfully so. Officials now swarming that man's home, looking for clues in Brooklyn. So where does the investigation go from here? Retired bomb squad commander Dr. Barry Denton is a former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. He joins us now to weigh in on this. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on. We got a lucky break yesterday.
Luckily for us and for the nation.
Yeah, so I want to start by asking you something that I've thought about, and I know a lot of people have thought about this recently. We're seeing a lot of the terror attack type styles we've seen overseas now coming into the U.S. So in large cities like New York and large cities across the country, how do you protect yourself from something like that? It's really frightening.
You know, Jillian, it's being aware of your surroundings. Nowadays, we are so engaged into our social media, our phones, earbuds. You go into any coffee shop in New York, anywhere in the United States, and people do not pay attention to what goes on around them. We need to focus on our environment. Pay attention. You know, it's the adage of, see something, say something. We really need to be paying attention outside of just being tuned in to our personal lives and know that other things are going on around us.
Yeah, that's very good advice. You see everybody distracted these days. I want to talk about the bomb here. I have no idea how difficult it is to make something like this, to make a pipe bomb. Obviously, this went wrong. Speak to that a little bit. How tough is it to do what he tried to do yesterday, and why do you think this didn't go off the way he thought it would?
Pipe bombs are very crude explosive devices. Anybody can make one. They find them online. I do not recommend trying to make one, but they're very crude devices that even kids can make. I would say more than likely he didn't know what he was doing. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, and he probably just had no clue what he was doing. Tried to make this, and fortunately for us, it failed. It didn't function properly, and luckily it saved lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's frightening. You think about the fact that somebody could be in their home making a bomb, and then it fails, and then all of a sudden you've got a neighborhood blown up. Like, you just don't know who's living next to you, who's walking next to you on these streets.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you go into any store, whether it's a convenience store, Walmart, any kind of Radio Shack or anything like that, you can buy all the tools you need for such a device. And it's scary. We really need to be super vigilant on our surroundings, on what people are buying, what our neighbors are doing. It's sad in this day and age, but we really have to pay attention more.
Well, you had a very busy, Port Authority at, 7:30 on a Monday morning. It's rush hour. People are moving around. How bad would this have been if it had gone off the way it was supposed to?
it could have been treacherous. It could have been just catastrophic for everyone involved. These devices, if they're made properly, they provide a lot of shrapnel, a lot of fragmentation. There could have been a lot more people injured. You know, having the device so close to him probably did not help the situation. He took a lot of the brunt of the impact from the pressure from the device, which again, that was to our benefit, not to his, but to our benefit.
I don't want to scare people by asking this question, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about. New York City, that we are aware of anyway, has been targeted twice in the last 6 weeks. And I say that we're aware of because sometimes we don't hear about, you know, plots that are foiled. How big of a deal is this that it seems to be increasing in numbers? At what point are they going to be really successful?
You know, it's the old adage of a blind squirrel will find an acorn, and that's exactly what we have to be cognizant about, that they keep trying. I mean, look at 9/11. They were successful, unfortunately, and New York continues to get the brunt of this. There are so many people who live in New York, they can hide easily in New York. So, you know, again, they keep trying, they keep trying. They're going to be successful. We just need to be vigilant and preventive. We really need to take steps to give our local, state, and federal officials the ability to be proactive in their approach to finding and tracking down terrorist cells and organizations.
Yeah, well, the people that work to stop these types of things are very, very adequate at their jobs, and they stop a lot. And they talk about how many of these are foiled, you know, every week, every month. So, but some do squeeze through. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nearly 50 illegal immigrants rounded up by the feds in 2 states. A 4-day ICE operation ending with the arrest of 27 illegals. 80% of them have a criminal history and 5 were previously deported. In Kentucky, 22 illegals arrested, all of them coming from Guatemala, Mexico, or Zimbabwe. ICE just announced a 40% spike in arrests over the last year.
Well, protesters trashing a vigil remembering Kate Steinle, the young woman who was killed by an illegal immigrant in San Francisco. Anti-Trump students showing up on the campus of UC Berkeley right across the bay saying that they refuse to accept a fascist America. A poster of Steinle later found in the trash can. The college Republicans there at UC Berkeley who organized that vigil say they refuse to back down. Steinle's killer, Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, had been deported 5 times. He was a convicted felon. He was just acquitted of murder.
It is 20 minutes after the hour. Terror in Texas. The teen just arrested, accused of plotting an attack right here in America.
On Trump Force One, there were 4 major food groups: McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, pizza, and Diet Coke.
Some hard-hitting news there. A soda segment backlash, an attempted terror attack causing chaos in the heart of Manhattan. CNN, though, covering President Trump's Diet Coke consumption. Carly Shimkus here with reaction to this one. Should be interesting. Stay tuned.
Morning. This is CNN, an attempted terrorist attack causing mass chaos in Manhattan. But if you were tuned into CNN, you wouldn't have heard about it.
Sounded just like James Earl Jones there. Just the same way. As it was all unfolding, the network instead covering President Trump's Diet Coke consumption as there was a terrorist attack in New York City. And Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7 is here with the soda segment backlash. And this was as the story really was developing.
Yeah, about an hour into the breaking news. CNN facing some major backlash for this one. An attempted terror attack in New York City became a #1 news story yesterday morning, as we know now. That issue became, caused panic across the country. The big takeaway was that it could have been far worse. But CNN facing backlash for reporting about the president's soda consumption as the details were still unfolding. Yossi on Twitter says more than an hour after the pipe bomb story broke, CNN was busy with Trump's Diet Coke. Note the ticker at the bottom right of NYPD responding. He's a media crisis expert, by the way. Another Twitter user says, shows how obsessed CNN is with destroying Trump. And lastly, Chris on Twitter says, we truly know where CNN's priorities lie. They prefer covering the president's soda habits rather than the New York City terror attack. So probably some timing slightly off there.
So those darn millennials, they just want everything, don't they?
Yeah, apparently, and not willing to work for it. So Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall says that they're having trouble finding recruits, finding people that want to be police police officers, and she says millennials are partly to blame. Take a listen.
We have nights, weekends, and holidays, and those are some of the things that are not necessarily attractive to the millennials who want all days off and to be the chief in 6 months.
So one Twitter user says, seems like young people are always misled in college and trade schools thinking they are a hot commodity. And Fred on Twitter says, poor snowflakes and cupcakes. I do know some hardworking millennials out there, but I guess not all millennials are hardworking.
What is technically a millennial? I think it's a little younger than us, but I don't know.
I know, it's
right
like
on the border.
20s, 30s. I think we're all on the
Are we a
border.
part of this disaster?
I'm far younger than millennials. Let's get that straight.
We're mocking ourselves.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
I like that. All right, let's talk about Netflix and
all right. So, a joke kind of gone wrong. Netflix is under fire for mocking people who watched their Christmas-themed romantic comedy called A Christmas Prince. Take a look at this tweet. They say, to the 53 people who watched A Christmas Prince every day for the past 18 days, who hurt you? A lot of folks on social media chiming in on this one. Christian says, good to know Netflix staff are sitting around their offices looking at private users' data, laughing about them, then sending out tweets to millions. They called that creepy. You know what's so funny about this is I took a couple days off. I saw the Netflix Christmas Prince movie.
No, you didn't.
I didn't watch it, but I really wanted to. It was on my bucket list for the weekend, and I guess
you and 53
kind of glad
others.
I didn't. Yeah.
Jeez.
All right, thanks, Carly.
Carly. All right, thank you.
It is 27 minutes after the hour. The Port Authority bombing proving soft targets are a top priority for terrorists. So how can they be protected? That's the question. Our next guest, a U.S. Army veteran and former NYPD officer, explains what police are looking for and how you can help.
And all eyes on Alabama for today's special election between Doug Jones and Roy Moore. And Pete Hegseth is live in Mobile talking with voters there. Hey, Pete.
What's up, Pete?
Good morning, guys. How you doing? We're at the Spot of Tea in Mobile, Alabama here. It's we got a few people. It'll fill up quickly, and the polls will fill up quickly as well. In 2.5 hours, they open for this consequential race. Republican Roy Moore, Democrat Doug Jones. The balance of this the Senate at issue. The president has weighed in. As we know, the Democratic Party is all in to see if they can pick up a seat in red Alabama. Today, we're going to find out. Stick with us all morning long. We'll be back in just a second on Fox and Friends First.
High alert today after an attempted lone wolf attack carried out by an ISIS fanatic. The second attack in just about 6 weeks.
So how can we combat lone wolves and protect soft targets like Times Square? Joining us now, former New York City police officer and Army veteran, Dr. Darren Porcher. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
What's the number one thing we should be doing to protect ourselves?
One of the things, it goes back to this campaign, See Something, Say Something. We live in a city of 8.5 million people. However, we only have a police department of 38,000 cops. 38,000 cops pales in comparison to the intelligence that can be elicited from the public. So the public plays a germane role in this, coupled with the innovations in technological advancement in law enforcement, such as drone maintenance and things to that effect. Video plays a key role in here, but ultimately we need the information from the public itself.
But to follow up on that, sorry, real quick, Rob, just as technology advances for police officers, it also advances for us as civilians who are walking the streets. Everyone's on their phone. How do you stop that?
Well, that's a real problem that we have. Everyone is buried in their buried in their cell phones, or they're listening to their headphones, and tunnel vision comes into play. Remember, you're protecting your fellow citizen here, so it's incumbent upon us as New Yorkers. You know, you bring up a valid point. When we look at the precedents for these lone wolf attacks, we look at what happened yesterday, and we look at the attack that happened in October. These were lone wolf attacks that were inspired by ISIS. They're the most difficult attacks to provide a fortification for, but it goes back to what I mentioned. The drone maintenance can be an effective tool in combating this terrorist attack moving forward, because the police department can only do but so much. We need to get more out there. And I give you an example of just being overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. We use drones, and they were a valuable tool in combating the caliphates and the terrorists overseas.
But what would the drones have done yesterday in the case where this was underground?
That's a very difficult situation. When you have an underground attack, a drone wouldn't have been the effective means. However, we look at the overall perspective. I want to say universally, these attacks occur outside and not inside. So that's where the drones would have come into play. When we take in consideration a subway car, then we need to ramp up the video and the audio in these subway cars, and make sure that we have the law enforcement on the other side of this that can direct forces accordingly to thwart these types of attacks moving forward.
A lot of groups are fighting so much surveillance and you know, the big brother mentality. reality that a lot of people believe keeps us safe here. Is that a scary thought that, you could, I mean, when we took back stop and frisk, or at least they attempted to try and get rid of stop and frisk, things like that keep people safe in a city this big? I mean, if you start to, remove some of the powers of the police, that's the risk you take, is that we're going to have more attacks.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the ACLU seems to be an enemy of law enforcement.
Right.
Moving forward, I mean, they fought caller ID. Just think about that when caller ID came into play. This is an arduous task. It's a fight. But at the same token, I believe that the president is installing the necessary justices in the court system that are going to help us to alleviate these burdens coming from groups like the ACLU, et cetera.
All right, okay. Dr. Durham Porcher, thank you. And let's be thankful that it was not as bad as it could have been yesterday.
Absolutely.
We got lucky.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
A Texas man facing 20 years in prison for his alleged ties to ISIS. FBI agents arresting and charging 18-year-old Cancer Kamdem Larkaya at his home in Houston. The feds say he told undercover FBI agents how to make assault rifles, along with telling ISIS supporters how to make homemade bombs. Officials say he wanted to execute attacks on U.S. soil, but tried several times to travel to Syria. He also claimed to carry a knife to attack officers if he was ever stopped, and even slept with a machete under his pillow.
All right, put me in, Coach. Basketball Hall of Famer Dennis Rodman says he is ready to solve the North Korea nuclear crisis, and he wants President Trump to make him a peace envoy. Rodman, who calls Kim Jong-un the Marshal, says he got insider information saying, quote, "I've been trying to tell Donald since day one, come talk to me, man. I'll tell you what the Marshal wants more than anything. It's not even that much." Rodman, who has visited Kim Jong-un in North Korea multiple times, is organizing a basketball game now in China between North Korea and the U.S. territory of Guam, which North Korea has threatened to bomb with a nuclear weapon. That'll be interesting. And all eyes on Alabama today. Voters heading to the polls in the special election to fill Jeff Sessions' vacant Senate seat. Controversial Republican Roy Moore facing off against Democrat Doug Jones today.
So what do the voters think is the big question? Pete Hegseth is talking to them live at the Spot of Tea restaurant in Mobile, Alabama. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning. Good morning, guys. It is very early here, but voters already enthusiastic, or at least talking about today's election, where they'll be, what polling places they'll be going to. We've got 3 of them here with us this morning who will be casting their ballots. First, Celisa, you said you were not initially a Roy Moore supporter. You were for Mo Brooks in the primary. Now you are voting for Roy Moore. Why?
Well, because of conservative values, and we got a Supreme Court situation.
So is it more about the balance of the Senate and the implications, or an investment in Roy Moore?
It's absolutely about the Senate and the implications in our Supreme Court.
Did you have any hesitation in voting for him?
Sure. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff out there. I think there's a lot of noise out there. But at some point, you just have to go back to what you believe and who's out there saying what you believe. And that's just it for me.
Randall, likewise, you support Roy Moore. Good morning.
Yeah, and I also was a Mo Brooks supporter initially, but when Mo was beat in the